want to. They go because the judge told them to. They go because the loved one said, you go or I'm going to kick your sorry whatever out of this place. And this idea, it's so difficult for those who have not been in desperate circumstances. I think maybe some people with certain terminal diseases or certain medical conditions that get into one of these self-help groups, they have that same sense. They don't get in there because they want to, but they get there because they need to. But the purpose of the person who captured this for me was someone I talked to out in Western Michigan one time, and he said, Doc, I didn't come into AA to save my soul. I came in to save my ass. It was in about 2 years before I learned they were connected. And yeah, that's
it.
That's the sense. No one goes because they want to, and that they're just a different kind of community is formed. The word community almost doesn't capture it. Mm-hmm. And we are here because we need to be here. Mm-hmm. The very real sense of I die if I'm not here. Mm-hmm. That is powerful. And again, if you are attentive I think at almost any meeting, you'll get this sense. Maybe not from everyone, but it will be in any meeting I've ever gone to. Mm-hmm. I've gone to a lot of diverse meetings in diverse places. That sense is there in some way.
Ernie, we've talked about the development of the steps and traditions in the ongoing history of AA. Can you talk a little bit about the scholarship that's been done since the publication of Not God and your sense of those new developments?
Again, the interest exploded at just about this time, and some wonderful scholars who sort of came in from the more general alcoholism field or from areas of psychology, especially Bill Miller, New Mexico, Robin Room of Berkeley, Toronto, Stockholm, Australia. Robin, the world's greatest bibliography. I mean, God, if you want to know about an article, call Robin. But you start getting serious scholarship. Other people start writing dissertations. When I first, after Not God was first published, and I first started teaching, they said only Harvard would have the chutzpah to accept Alcoholics Anonymous as a dissertation topic. Well, this proved that it could be done, and others from various aspects. Women, what's the role of women in AA? Some people coming from spirituality, what's the role of this aspect of spirituality? And I became sort of a node for people, anyone who was seriously studying AA would get in touch with me, which was marvelous because I was able to connect people with each other. This is how we met in many ways, and what we've done for each other, in fact. And the scholarship has, I think, continued. The dissertations have slowed down a little bit because graduate education, the humanities, and even in some of the social sciences has slowed down considerably. The scholarship is of varying quality. I mean, some of these, I will not mention any institutions, but some of these, 160-page send it in by mail doctorates that some people have, it may make them a great living on television or on the road, but this is not there is shoddy scholarship on AA too. Mm-hmm. But I think that especially the presence of people like Bill Miller, Robin Room, you, myself, even those who are not directly that much about AA, like Ellen Marlatt, who they're more in the alcoholism field. They're more interested really in harm reduction than in abstinence programs, because they're trying to locate the programs that they're interested in, also offer good information on AA. Right. So I think the scholarship exploded. I think it's fallen off a little bit more recently, but...
What do you think about the biographies of key AA figures that have been added since the publication of Not God?
I think that's the way to learn AA is its stories. I mean, our stories goes in a general way. And I think it's great we have the biographies of non-alcoholics, like Dr. Silkworth, Sister Ignatia. Mary Dara's work on Sister Ignatia and Dale's on Silkworth, because this is how were these people so able to become honorary alcoholics almost? Sometimes they used to say only an alcoholic can help an alcoholic. They say, well, the AA does not believe that because you look at its history, all these non-alcoholics, Silkworth and Ignatia. But what they did have, they had in their life what within mysticism is called the dark night of the soul. Something happened in their lives that they hit bottom. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about those biographies is we see these stories and we come to understand that you don't have to be an alcoholic to help an alcoholic. You don't have to have a disease to be curing of that disease. You have to somehow touch the zero spot, the hole in the center of your own being. And the biographies that have been done, I think in general, again, they're of varying quality, and you know, we can as scholars, we nitpick. I mean, I can tell you what's wrong about all of these biographies, but I can even tell you some things that are wrong with Not God, which is why I keep waiting for it to be replaced.
And let me ask you there, elaborate on that last point, because I've heard you say many times you really hope that at some point there'll be a sort of an updating of your research on Not God.
Absolutely. I'm embarrassed. I mean, when something is authoritative for 30 years, there's something wrong. And part of it is no one will ever have access to the AA archives that I did. It's just impossible. I was there on the ground floor, and nobody else is going to get to rummage through the letters. And you can't do that after a certain time. But so much has been discovered. The AA History Lovers listserv and all of people have discovered so many things. Not God is a history of ideas. And we do not know a lot about the economics of early AA. We do not know much about the interpersonal actions or relationships of people in early AA. And it really is time for AA story to be told from a different perspective than the history of ideas. I think I did a pretty good job in the history of ideas. Somebody maybe will revise that eventually. But I think what's needed is a history that will incorporate all of these things that have been learned since. And coming from a different perspective, tell this story. Because again, it's not producing a dissertation. I discovered in the middle, this is the marvelous thing, I stopped writing a dissertation and started telling a story. And that's why you've got part one and part two of that. I went back to my natural. But basically, it's the story. And we just need that story told from different perspectives, because there's no single story. I mean, I'm sure the story that your wife would tell of Bill White and the story that your daughter would tell of Bill White would be the same Bill White, but with very different stories. Well, same is true of AA. I just came from one perspective.
One of the, I think, most interesting articles you've done since the publication of Not God was one with Bill Miller, when you talked about some of the popular and professional misconceptions of AA. Could you talk about maybe what you think some of those major misconceptions are compared to your knowledge of the historical AA?
I have I knew you were going to ask this, so I sort of took out because it's hard to remember 8 things. I mean, I'm at the point of senior moments right now, 72nd birthday recently. So, but this is the point we made in that article. AA writings do not assert that there is only one form of alcoholism or alcohol problems. They do not assert that moderate drinking is impossible for everyone with alcohol problems. They do not assert that alcoholics should be labeled, confronted aggressively, or coerced into treatment and being helped. They do not say that alcoholics are riddled with denial or other defense mechanisms. That vocabulary is totally alien. They do not say that alcoholism is a purely physical disorder. They do not say that alcoholism is hereditary. They do not say that there is only one way to recover. In fact, Bill explicitly said that AA would perhaps at best have help the alcoholics who needed it. They do not say that alcoholics are not responsible for their condition or their actions. And these are misconceptions people have about AA because some AA members have said that. See, the problem when you have over 2 million authoritative sources of who you are is that they're not all going to agree. And the thing is, New York does not collect these and say, oh, this one is right, and this one is right, and this one is right. New York says nothing. New York just collects them. I mean, read the grapevine if you want to hear diversity, or go to a meeting if you want to hear diversity. And people have opinions on some of these issues, but these are, these opinions just come out. AA does not say any of these things. And people should read that chapter on more about alcoholism. If you think you can drink like a gentleman, go over to the nearest bar, and if you can do it, our hats are off to you. And for some people have said, oh my God, how terrible. I mean, this is a fatal disease. You might die, someone might die if they do that. Yeah. You're right, it's a fatal disease. But, if someone needs to discover their powerlessness and they're not doing it, this may be the only way they will. And for some, so I mean, it says that in the big book, though, and not everything in the big book is necessarily right. This is something else to remember. This is not sacred scripture.
Right.
These are ideas pulled together by a bunch of drunks who had less than 4 years sobriety.
Right.
And this canonical status, the big book has been in many ways, the proof is there because of the effects of it. But on the other hand, this was not handed down on stone tablets from on high.
Right.
And this was, recently, an early version of the manuscript has come into the domain where people can see it. An investor had held it in a vault, and we sort of knew it existed. And apparently, it's one of the late drafts of the multi-lith copy before they sent the final copy to the publisher. And there's a lot of marginations and a lot of comments that people made on the original draft. Well, everyone's seen the multi-lith draft, and there are some differences in the book itself, but apparently that there are some ideas floated that did not make into the big book that are written on here, and I think that as access to that becomes available, it's a very precious manuscript. There's a lot going on with preserving it. Mm-hmm. But when access to that is made available, I think we'll see very explicitly what ideas were not incorporated that were floated, and we'll know much more about those that were.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering too, in terms of, are there some factual details that would change in a new edition of Not God?
Oh, definitely. I mean,
based on this new research.
I don't think there are any errors. At least no one has pointed out any factual error that, it might be an error in the text, but the error is in the letter that I cited in the footnote. That's why there's got this extensive section of notes, because it's one reason I published with Hazelden is they agreed to publish the full notes, which commercial publishers are afraid of. But there are so many other things that have been discovered. I mean, we've discovered more about Morgan and discovered a lot more about Hank and
even the founding date.
the founding date. Actually, they say, June 10th, 1935, and research. Dr. Bob went to that last AMA medical convention, came back on the train drunk. I mean, the last medical convention was such that it had to be June 17th. I mean, everything had to happen a week later. And the way in which this error is made is very simple. I mean, probably they're getting there, and, Bill on the telephone, one problem for the historian was Bill and Bob contact each other by telephone, which left no record by, like writings. Bill was a writer, but Bob wasn't. Bob would write messages on prescription pads in large hand. He had no stationery, I don't think. But I'm sure, Bill said, Bob, when was it? You came back, you were lushed up from Atlantic City, and, we picked you up, and we took you home and dried you out, and you went in, and let's see, June 10th. Yeah, sure, people do not remember dates. I mean, what did you have for dinner on August 15th last year, August 15th of this year? And, the evidence, I think it's very funny. It's very ironic almost that AA doesn't even know its own founding date, which is Dr. Bob's last drink, June 17th, 1935.
And you mentioned the manuscript, and we also seem to be getting this addition of additional archives. Since what you had access to in your research.
Other people's papers are coming together. I mean, all of Sue Smith's materials, Dr. Bob's adopted daughter, Sue Smith Windows, Brown University, where the collection of my materials is, and Marty Mann's materials, because Marty is the first, not the first woman in AA, not the first woman to stay sober in AA, but the first woman to really make it big in AA, and then, of course, start National Council. A lot of correspondence from her goes back to this. So, there are materials. Right. I saw some of Marty's papers at Syracuse, but not the whole. Everything wasn't. There are many more things available now that I did not have access to because I didn't know about them or they weren't available. Right. Again, I was writing when you write a dissertation, you try to talk about everything, you'd never finish. There are a lot of ABDs in the world. And this is a trap. Yeah. I warn the future researchers to decide what you're going to do and do it. Don't get dragged off on the side. I think one of the great moments of AA history that really the people who want to worship something, Dr. Bob's specialty, he was a proctologist. And on June 17th, Dr. Bob awakened, somewhat in withdrawal, and said to Bill, I'm going to go through with this thing. And you know, Bill thought he meant the surgery, and he said, yeah, but I mean, I'm going to go through with these things we've been talking about. So they drive Dr. Bob to the hospital and give him a bottle of beer before they let him out of the car so that his hand will be steady. He's in withdrawal. You see the potential for malpractice here. But so Dr. Bob goes into the hospital and performs surgery, you know, especially with proctology. I would like a picture of Dr. Bob's patient on that last day from Dr. Bob's point of view of that patient. And you know, there's certain obscenity that people use times, but I think a picture of that person's posterior as viewed by Dr. Smith on June 17th, 1935 should really hang in every AA clubhouse. That's one of my lasting hopes, that someone will come along and do that.